The plasma scorched across the command deck as Queen Lyra dove behind a shattered console. Her golden armor was cracked, her wings torn, and her once mighty fleet reduced to 17 burning ships limping through the void. "Your Majesty! Hull breach on decks 4 through 9, her tactical officer screamed over the alarms. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the Krell tear us apart." Lyra's 3 hearts hammered against her chest. The Krell dreadnoughts filled every viewport, their black hulls bristling with weapons that had already annihilated her homeworld. 2 billion of her people were ash. Her children were ash. Everything she had sworn to protect was gone. "Send the distress beacon again," she commanded, her voice cracking. "All frequencies, every language we know. Majesty, we've sent it 40 times. No one is answering. No one is coming." Another impact rocked the ship. Lyra felt her spine crack against the bulkhead. Her second-in-command, Commander Vex, dragged her upright with his remaining arm. Blood poured from his compound eyes. "There's one more," he whispered. "The human." Lyra's breath caught. The human. For 3 months, a single human vessel had shadowed the refugee fleet at extreme range, never communicating, never helping, just watching with sensors that saw everything and revealed nothing. The humans had been silent for 2 years since first contact, observing a dozen species but never intervening, never speaking, never choosing sides in the wars that consumed the galaxy. "He won't answer," Lyra said. "Humans don't get involved." "Then we die begging," Vex replied. Lyra grabbed the communications array herself. Her claws shook as she opened a direct channel to the human ship. "This is Queen Lyra of the Throne Fleet to the human vessel. My people are dying. Our children are already dead. The Krell are butchers who will spread across every system until nothing living remains. I know you don't interfere. I know you just watch. But if there's any mercy in your species, any shred of compassion, please, please, we're begging you."
Silence!
Another explosion tore through engineering. The lights died. Emergency systems cast everything in crimson. "Majesty, the Krell are preparing their final volley," her weapons officer reported. 30 seconds. Lyra closed her eyes. She had failed. Her people would be extinct within the minute, and the silent human would record it all with perfect clarity for whatever cold database they maintained. Then every screen on the bridge flickered to life. A single word appeared in perfect throne script, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. "Understood." The human ship dropped its stealth field. Lyra's breath stopped. The vessel that materialized between her fleet and the Krell Armada wasn't a scout ship. It wasn't even a warship by any classification she knew. It was something else entirely. And it was already moving. The human ship defied physics. It crossed 200,000 kilometers in 3 seconds flat. No acceleration curve, no energy bloom, just instantaneous repositioning that made Lyra's sensors scream with error codes. The vessel was sleek and dark, barely 300 meters long, insignificant against the Krell dreadnoughts that each massed 20 times its size. The lead Krell dreadnought fired everything. Plasma lances, kinetic railguns, fusion torpedoes. Enough firepower to crack a moon poured into the space where the human ship hovered. The human ship didn't dodge. It simply existed in a space where the weapons weren't. Every shot curved away at impossible angles, bending around the vessel like water around stone. Not shields. Something else. Something that made reality itself step aside. "What are we seeing?" Vex whispered. Lyra couldn't answer because the human ship was already firing back. No visible weapons discharged, no missiles launched, but the lead Krell dreadnought came apart in a way that made Lyra's mind rebel against the image. The hull didn't explode or shatter. It unraveled, every molecule separating from its neighbor with surgical precision, the entire kilometer-long warship becoming a perfectly dispersed cloud of component atoms in less than a heartbeat. 2,000 Krell died without even knowing they were under attack. The second dreadnought tried to run. It engaged its jump drive, tearing a hole in space-time to escape into faster-than-light transit. The human ship fired again. The wormhole collapsed with the dreadnought halfway through. The screaming on the Krell emergency channels lasted 4 seconds before cutting off forever. "They're retreating," Lyra's sensor officer reported, his voice hollow with shock. "All remaining Krell vessels are breaking formation." 23 dreadnoughts turned as one, their massive engines flaring blue-white, as they burned hard away from the human ship. They scattered in different vectors, trying to deny the human a consolidated target. It didn't matter. The human vessel didn't pursue. It simply rotated in place, and wherever its bow pointed, Krell ships ceased to exist, not exploding, not burning, just transitioning from matter to dispersed atoms with the finality of a light switch being thrown. 15 seconds, 20, 3 dreadnoughts. Not a single shot wasted. Not a single miss. Each target selected and eliminated with the cold efficiency of an exterminator clearing vermin. The last Krell dreadnought made it almost to jump range before it came apart. Then there was silence. Lyra stared at her screens, trying to process what had just happened. The Krell armada that had burned her homeworld, slaughtered her people, and hunted her survivors across 6 systems had been annihilated in under a minute by a single human ship that her sensors insisted was barely armed. "Majesty," Vex said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the human?" "Yes. Audio only. It's in our language." Lyra's hands trembled as she opened the channel. A voice filled the bridge, male, calm, with an accent she couldn't place. The words were perfectly pronounced, each syllable in flawless throne speech. "Queen Lyra, you and your people are safe now. The Krell will not trouble you again. I'm transmitting coordinates to a habitable world in a secure system. You'll find supplies waiting. Enough to start over." Lyra found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you? Why did you wait so long? Why watch us die before helping?" The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. "Because we needed to be certain. We needed to see what you would do when everything was lost. Would you surrender? Would you turn on each other? Would you abandon your weak to save the strong?" "And?" Lyra asked, tears streaming down her face. "You begged for salvation, not for yourself, but for people already dead. You put your children first, even in your final words. You stayed together. You're worth saving, Queen Lyra. Some species are, most aren't. The Krell have been evaluated. They won't be troubling anyone anymore. Not in this galaxy. Not in any galaxy." The channel went quiet for a moment. Then the human spoke again. His voice carried something new. Not quite emotion, but the shadow of it. "Humanity doesn't interfere, Your Majesty. We observe. We record. We wait. But when we do act, we act completely. Follow the coordinates. Rebuild. Thrive. You've earned it." The coordinates led to a world that shouldn't exist. Lyra stood on the bridge of her flagship. 3 days later, staring at a planet that her databases had no record of. Lush continents sprawled beneath swirling white clouds. Oceans glittered in the light of a stable yellow star. Atmospheric readings showed perfect oxygen-nitrogen balance, ideal temperature ranges, and 0 contamination. "Majesty, this system isn't on any star chart," Vex reported. His wounds had been treated, but he still moved stiffly. It's like someone hid it from every survey ever conducted. The humans hid it, Lyra said. They've been preparing this. Her censor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. Majesty, I'm detecting structures on the surface. Cities, infrastructure, power grids, all of it dormant but functional. Lyra felt her throat tighten. How many cities? Enough for 50 million people. Maybe more. And there are supply depots, agricultural facilities, medical centers, everything we need. It's all just sitting there waiting. The 17 ships of her broken fleet descended through the atmosphere in a ragged formation. Lyra watched through the viewport as they approached the largest city, a sprawling metropolis of elegant towers and wide boulevards, designed in a style that mixed throne architecture with something else, something human. They landed in a central plaza large enough for all 17 vessels. When Lyra stepped onto the soil of this impossible world, she found a tablet waiting on a pedestal. It activated at her touch, displaying text in throne script. Welcome to Haven. Population capacity 60 to million. Current infrastructure complete. Agricultural systems seeded and ready for harvest in 40 days. Medical facilities stocked for 10 years. Educational databases comprehensive. This world is yours. No rent, no debt, no strings. Build something beautiful. Humanity will be watching. Lyra's legs gave out. She knelt in the plaza and wept, while her people emerged from the ships around her, staring at the miracle they'd been given. But Vex was studying his scanner with a frown. Majesty, I'm picking up a signal. It's faint, coming from the northern continent. It's human. Lyra stood, wiping her eyes. Take me there. They flew north in a shuttle, crossing mountain ranges and forests that looked untouched by any civilization. The signal led them to a valley where a single small structure sat beside a crystalline lake. Not a military installation, just a simple dwelling, human in design. The human was waiting outside. He was tall, perhaps 2 meters, wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb light. His face was unreadable, brown eyes that had seen too much, skin the color of deep earth. He looked young and ancient simultaneously. Queen Lyra, he said in perfect throne speech. I wasn't sure you'd come looking. Lyra approached slowly, her guards flanking her with weapons ready but not raised. You're the one from the ship. The voice. My name is Derek Cole. I'm the observer assigned to this sector. Observer? Lyra repeated. You've been watching us for months. Watching us die. Why? Derek's expression didn't change. Because intervention is a responsibility humanity doesn't take lightly. We learned that lesson the hard way, long before we left our own system. We've seen 1,000 species rise and fall. Most fall because of what they are, not what happens to them. The Krell? The Krell were evaluated over the course of 8 years. They failed every test. They glorified suffering. They weaponized cruelty. They couldn't be reasoned with or reformed. Derek's voice remained calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. They don't exist anymore. We've cleansed 47 of their colony worlds in the past 72 hours. The species is extinct. Lyra felt her blood freeze. 47 worlds? In 3 days? We're thorough. How many humans did that take? How many ships? Derek looked at her for a long moment. Queen Lyra, I need you to understand something about humanity. We don't have fleets. We don't have armies. We have observers. There are 300 of us scattered across this galaxy. Each of us operates alone. Each of us has the authority and capability to end civilizations if necessary. Vex's weapon clattered to the ground. 300? Just 300 of you. We found that smaller numbers make better decisions. We're harder to corrupt, harder to turn into the things we're supposed to stop. Derek gestured to the city behind them. We built Haven over the course of 6 months. We built 40 others like it across this region of space. We've been preparing for scenarios exactly like yours for 2 decades. Lyra's mind struggled to process the implications. You built 40 worlds in preparation for refugees you didn't know would exist? Derek nodded. We knew they would exist. Conquest and genocide are constants in every galaxy. Predator species always emerge. The Krell weren't the first. They won't be the last. He turned toward the lake, his reflection perfect in the still water. Humanity spent 3 centuries devouring itself in wars that nearly ended us. We clawed our way back from the edge of extinction twice. We learned what happens when power exists without accountability, when technology advances faster than wisdom. So you became judges, Lyra said quietly. You decide who lives and who dies. No. Derek's voice sharpened. We observe, we record. We wait for species to reveal themselves through their choices. The Krell revealed themselves when they turned warfare into entertainment, when they broadcast the screaming of children as propaganda, when they rejected 17 different peace offers because slaughter was more satisfying than coexistence. He faced her again. You revealed yourselves too, Queen Lyra. When your world burned, your military wanted to scatter, save whoever could run fastest. You ordered them to protect the civilian transports first. You stayed behind with the slowest ships. You could have abandoned 10,000 people and saved yourself twice over. Lyra felt the memory like a blade. They were families. The elderly. Exactly. The Krell would have saved their strongest and sacrificed the weak. You did the opposite. That's the difference between a species worth preserving and one that needs to end. Vex stepped forward, his voice shaking. What gives you the right? What makes humans so certain of their judgment? Derek's expression finally changed. Pain flickered across his face, brief but devastating. We took the responsibility because someone had to, and we'd already paid the price of learning why it matters. He pulled a small device from his pocket, projecting a hologram into the air. Lyra gasped. The image showed Earth, but not the Earth from the peaceful exploration broadcasts humanity had shared during first contact. This Earth was burning. Continents glowed with nuclear fire. Oceans boiled. Cities melted into glass. The atmosphere itself seemed to be tearing apart. This was us 400 years ago, Derek said. We had achieved faster-than-light travel. We had fusion power, we had genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, and we used it all to nearly exterminate ourselves over resources we didn't even need, ideologies that didn't matter, and hatreds we invented to justify slaughter. The hologram shifted, showing massive ships lifting off from the burning world, thousands of them, fleeing into space. 8 billion people died in the collapse. 300 million survived on colony ships. We spent 2 centuries rebuilding in exile, asking ourselves one question over and over. How do we make sure this never happens again? Not just to us, but to anyone. The hologram changed again. This time it showed humans returning to Earth, rebuilding the scarred world with technology that seemed almost magical. Cities rose from ash. Forests regrew. Oceans cleared. We developed technology to fix what we'd broken. But more importantly, we developed something else, a framework, a way of thinking. We call it the protocol. What's the protocol? Lyra asked. Derek closed the hologram. Every human child is raised with absolute transparency about our history. They see the collapse in full detail. They study every mistake, every atrocity, every moment of madness that nearly ended us. Then they're taught the question we ask before taking any action: does this reduce suffering or increase it? He gestured to the city. Building Haven reduces suffering. Eliminating the Krell reduced suffering. Waiting while you fled across 6 systems increased your suffering temporarily, but it gave us certainty. It let us see your true nature. When the masks came off, Lyra felt anger rising through her grief. You let my children die for certainty? Yes. Derek didn't flinch from her gaze, because if we'd intervened immediately and you'd turned out like the Krell, we would have saved monsters and empowered them to hurt others. We've made that mistake before. 3 times in the past century, we rescued species that seemed noble under pressure but became tyrants the moment they felt safe again. What did you do to them? What we did to the Krell. Complete removal. No second chances once the evaluation is complete and failed. Vex's voice was barely a whisper. You're not saviors. You're executioners who occasionally choose mercy. Derek considered this. That's accurate. We're not heroes, Commander. We're trauma survivors with enough power to enforce the lessons we learned in blood. We know exactly how dark intelligent species can become because we've been there ourselves. We went further into the darkness than the Krell ever did. He walked to the water's edge. The difference is, we climbed back out and decided to make sure the galaxy never suffers what we inflicted on ourselves. So yes, we execute species that prove themselves irredeemable, and we save species that prove themselves worth saving. You're alive because when everything was lost, you stayed kind. Lyra sat on a stone beside the lake, her exhaustion finally catching up. How long will you watch us now? How long until you decide we've failed some test we don't know we're taking? Derek remained standing, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The evaluation never stops, but it changes. You've passed the crisis assessment. Now comes the harder part. What you build when you're safe, when you have resources and time and no external enemy to unite against. You think we'll turn on each other, Vex said bitterly. Most species do. Scarcity creates solidarity. Abundance creates division. You'll have disputes about governance, about resources, about what kind of society to build from the ashes. The question is whether you resolve those disputes with dialogue or violence. Lyra looked up at him. And if we choose violence? Then I intervene before it escalates. I remove the aggressors. I protect the innocent. I give you chances to correct course. Derek finally turned to face her. But Queen Lyra, I don't think you'll need that. Do you know why? Tell me. Because you're already thinking about it. You're already worried about maintaining your people's integrity. Leaders who ask these questions rarely become tyrants. It's the ones who never doubt themselves that we have to end. A chime sounded from Derek's wrist device. He glanced at it, and his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I need to leave. There's a situation developing in the Indari system. Another genocide? Lyra asked. A potential one. The Bellary Consortium just declared war on the Andari Coalition over mining rights. Intelligence suggests the consortium is planning orbital bombardment of civilian centers. Derek started walking toward a clearing beyond his dwelling. I need to observe and determine if intervention is warranted. Lyra stood quickly. Wait, you said there are only 300 observers for the entire galaxy. How do you cover everything? How many atrocities happen while you're watching somewhere else? Derek stopped. For the first time, she saw true emotion cross his face. Grief, deep and old. Too many. We lose species every year that we might have saved if we'd been watching them instead of someone else. We have to make choices, prioritize. We save who we can and live with the weight of everyone we couldn't reach in time. That's impossible, Vex said. No one could carry that burden. Humanity carries impossible burdens. It's what we do. Derek continued to the clearing where a ship materialized, its stealth field dissolving. It was smaller than the vessel that had destroyed the Krell fleet, sleeker, almost organic in design. We carry them because the alternative is letting the galaxy burn while we look away. We tried that once, never again. He paused at the ship's entrance. Queen Lyra, there's a communication system in the city's central tower. It connects directly to me. If you need help, if something threatens your people, use it. I'll come. Even if you're in the middle of saving someone else, I have protocols for that too. But yes, you've earned our protection. That means something to humanity. We don't abandon species we've chosen to save. Lyra felt tears threatening again. I don't know how to thank you. You've given us everything. Thank me by building something worth the lives it cost to get you here. Thank me by proving that kindness survives trauma. Thank me by becoming the species you showed us you could be when you begged for salvation with your last breath. Derek climbed into his ship. Oh, and Queen Lyra. One more thing? Yes. You asked why I waited so long to answer your distress call. The truth is, I heard it the first time you sent it, all 40 times. I was already moving before you finished begging. I just needed to position my ship where the Krell couldn't see it coming. The ship's door began to close. You were coming anyway? Lyra called out. Before you were certain? Derek's voice echoed from inside. I was 90% certain after watching you for 2 months, but I needed the Krell to commit fully, to show themselves completely, so there'd be no doubt about what needed to happen to them.
Your final message wasn't for my benefit, Your Majesty.
It was evidence for the record, proof that humanity made the right choice. The ship lifted silently, hovered for a moment, then vanished. Not accelerating away, just ceasing to exist in that location and existing somewhere else. The same impossible movement she'd seen during the battle. Vex stood beside her, staring at the empty sky. Majesty, are we safe? Or are we prisoners in a gilded cage with a warden who can erase us if we displease him? Lyra thought about the question for a long time. Finally she said, I think we're something humanity never had when they needed it most. We're a second chance watched over by people who remember what happens when no one's watching. Maybe that's the same as being prisoners. Or maybe it's the closest thing to grace the universe offers. She turned back toward the city where her people were exploring their new home, where children were laughing for the first time in months, where hope was rebuilding itself from ashes and human charity. Either way, Commander, we're alive. Let's make sure we deserve it. 6 months passed like a dream fighting against memory. Heaven bloomed. The agricultural systems yielded crops that fed everyone with surplus to spare. Children attended schools in buildings that had waited empty for their voices. The elderly found peace in gardens designed by architects who understood what refugees needed most. Beauty without reminders of what they'd lost. Lyra stood in the council chamber, watching her advisors argue about industrial zoning, normal problems, peaceful problems, the kind of disputes that came from building a future instead of fleeing death. But she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from somewhere beyond the stars. Vex entered quietly, his tablet glowing. Majesty, we've received a message from Derek Cole. Lyra's pulse quickened. What does it say? He's requesting permission to land. He wants to conduct what he calls a progress evaluation. The room fell silent. Every advisor turned to look at her, fear and hope mixing on their faces. 6 months of peace, and now the human was returning to judge them. Tell him yes, Lyra said. We have nothing to hide. Derek's ship arrived at sunset, materializing in the same plaza where Lyra had first read his welcome message. He emerged looking exactly as before, unchanged, carrying the weight of galactic oversight like a coat he could never remove. Lyra met him alone as he'd requested. "Queen Lyra," he said, offering a human gesture she'd learned meant respect. A slight bow of the head. "You look well. We are well. Your world has given us everything we needed." She gestured to the city around them, alive with evening activity. "We've had disagreements, but no violence. We've established democratic councils. We've begun planning our first university." Derek smiled, and it transformed his face. "I know. I've been watching." "Of course you have. I also know about the incident 3 weeks ago, the supply dispute between the northern and southern settlements." Lyra's stomach dropped. The argument had grown heated, voices raised, accusations thrown. For one terrible moment, she'd feared it would escalate. "We resolved it peacefully. Mediation and compromise." "I know. I watched that too." Derek's smile widened slightly. "You did well. Both sides left unhappy but alive and willing to work together. That's actual peace, not the pretend kind. So we passed? You're passing." Present tense, continuous action. Derek pulled out his device, projecting data into the air between them. "I'm here to offer you something, Queen Lyra, a choice." The hologram showed star charts, dozens of systems marked with human symbols. "These are observer stations, communication hubs that connect to the network humanity maintains across the galaxy. I'm authorized to give you access." Lyra stared at the map. "Why? Because you're ready for the next step. You've proven you can govern yourselves with justice. Now you need to decide if you want to help us govern the galaxy with mercy." "I don't understand." Derek closed the hologram. "Humanity needs allies, Your Majesty, not soldiers or servants, but partners. Species who've survived trauma and chosen kindness anyway. Species who understand suffering and work to prevent it. You qualify. What would this partnership mean?" "Information sharing. You tell us what you see, what you hear, what concerns you. We investigate. If you encounter species in crisis, you can contact us directly. If you discover threats, we respond. You become our eyes and ears in regions we can't monitor constantly." Vex had appeared silently during the conversation. "And if we refuse, then nothing changes. You keep Haven. You keep our protection. You live your lives in peace. This is an offer, not a demand." Derek looked between them. "But I think you'll accept, because you're not the kind of people who can watch others suffer and do nothing. I've seen that proven repeatedly." Lyra felt the weight of the choice. To join humanity's network meant accepting responsibility for horrors beyond her world. It meant never truly leaving the darkness behind. But it also meant the children who died on her homeworld might not have died for nothing. It meant their memory could become action, their sacrifice could become salvation for others facing the same evil. "I need to consult my council," she said. "Of course. Take your time." Derek turned to leave, then paused. "Queen Lyra, one last thing. The Andari situation I mentioned 6 months ago? Yes. The Valari Consortium backed down after we appeared in their space. No shots fired. No lives lost. Sometimes the threat of intervention is enough. That's the galaxy we're trying to build. One where genocide becomes unthinkable because everyone knows humanity is watching, and humanity does not forgive atrocities." He walked back to his ship, and Lyra called after him. "Derek, does it get easier, carrying this weight?" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "It gets heavier every year. Every species we save adds to it. Every species we fail to save adds more." But the weight means we're still human. The day it feels light is the day we've become the thing we swore to stop. His ship lifted into the darkening sky and vanished. Lyra stood in the plaza as stars emerged overhead, thousands of them, each one potentially sheltering life that needed saving or stopping. She thought about her children, about the billions lost, about the choice before her. Vex stood beside her. "What will you tell the council, Majesty?" Lyra watched the stars, and for the first time since the burning of her world, she felt something beyond grief. She felt purpose. "I'll tell them humanity gave us salvation when we begged for it. Now it's our turn to answer when someone else begs. We're joining the network, Commander. The throne people will not look away." Above them, invisible and eternal, humanity kept watch over a galaxy, slowly learning that kindness had teeth, and mercy had a price, and some species remembered their darkest days well enough to make sure no one else had to live through the same nightmare alone. The silent human had answered once. Now his answer echoed across the stars.